So, bore da pawb, good morning all. Croeso i'r trydydd sesiwn Sbotolau Hinsawdd, a diolch am ymuno bore yma. Good morning all, welcome to our third Climate Spotlight session, and thanks for joining this morning as well. So today's session topic, as you can see there, we'll be looking at behavioural science and climate change. So really looking forward to a really interesting session with James and Olivia, who are joining us today. Just quick things to mention first of all. So we're recording today's session, so just to make you aware of that, there was a privacy policy included in the meeting invite, which hopefully you've all seen. So any objections with the recording, please let us know, or of course you can choose to leave the session at this time. So just to mention as well, the session's being facilitated by the WLGA's Climate Support Programme, which is funded by Welsh Government. And the aim of our programme is to support Welsh councils collectively in preparing for a net zero public sector by 2030. So we'd sent out a few resources, background reading for today's session. And thanks to those that completed the form as well that we'd sent out. Thank you. And just a quick reminder, if you're not speaking at the session, if I could just ask you to go on mute, please, that'd be great. Thank you. So yeah, I think that's it from me. So really pleased to introduce our speakers, James and Olivia from the Behavioural Science Unit in Public Health Wales. So I'll hand over to them and then we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end of the session as well. So yeah, thanks. If I can hand over to both of you then, please. Thanks, James.
Hi everybody, thanks very much, Zoe. Really excited to be here to talk to you about behavioural science. My name is James Smolinski, and I'm from the Behavioural Science Unit in Public Health Wales. And Olivia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, thanks James. I'm Olivia Palmer. I work in the Behavioural Science Unit. I'm very much here just to support James with any questions and things like that. So really James is leading this, so credit to him, not me.
Thanks very much. So, like I said, really excited to be here. We've got stacks to cover, and thanks to everybody who filled out a survey prior to joining. I can see that there's a huge range of knowledge about behavioural science among us today, which is really, really exciting. So I really hope that there's something that everybody can take away in this session. Wanted to cover a little bit about what behavioural science is, how it can help you. Wanted to introduce or reintroduce people to the COMBI model, which is a framework in behavioural science that might be really, really useful. Also wanted to speak a little bit about behavioural specification, why that's so important when we're engaging in behavioural science. And then finally, talk about some resources and next steps if you're interested in learning about more. So behavioural science is a really exciting multidisciplinary field that's centered on the idea of really trying to understand and hopefully change human behaviour. I really am drawn to this picture of this bridge that's been been built in the wrong place. Now, structurally, I'm sure that this bridge is fantastic. I'm sure it'll be there for the next 100 years. I'm sure that it can handle lots and lots of cars on it at the same time. But it's failed in its outcome to try or its goal to try and get people from one side of this ravine to the other. And I think that we can all relate to situations we've been in where we're working on something and we're not really sure it's going to achieve the purpose that we want it to. Behavioural science is really interested in this as a concept, I think, and it's got some potential resources that could be useful in trying to avoid situations like this. So this is an interesting image that we'll be returning to later on in this session. But I wanted to kick this off with a bit of a strange question for you all that you probably weren't expecting to be answering, which is, I would like you to think about what would have to happen for you to stop regularly brushing your teeth. And I would like you to put a couple of ideas in the chat if possible. Now, the important part of this question is the regularly. I'm not interested really in the times when your partner might be in the bathroom and you can't get in. I'm interested in that interruption of this regular habit that you've built up throughout your life, whether you're brushing your teeth 2 or 3 times a day. Just curious, what some ideas, put them in the chat. What might it take to stop you from regularly brushing your teeth? I'll pause whilst that is coming in. Really interesting ideas already. This idea about pain potentially, if that was happening every time you brush your teeth. Yeah. not having any teeth is an interesting idea. Yeah, that would be a pointless activity in that case. Interesting here. I really like this one about credible evidence that there are better ways of looking after teeth. Interesting around dementia. Well, you've got fantastic ideas. Broken arms. Yeah. Lack of toothpaste. Fantastic. Okay, really interested to see these ideas that are coming out. What I thought we could do is potentially explore. Sorry, just mute myself. What I thought we could do is explore this through the lens of behavioural science. So to do that, I wanted to introduce you to a framework that is used quite a lot called the COMBI model. Now, some of you will be familiar with this, but just for those who aren't, this theory suggests that capability, opportunity, and motivation are the main drivers of human behaviour. So all three of these things need to be present for a behaviour to occur. So if we find that a person has the capability to do an action, they have the opportunity to do so, but they're not motivated, then that's the thing that we need to work to try and find out how we can provide that for the behaviour to occur. Now, COMBI model is interesting because it can be broken into its subdomains, which are here in the middle, but also its theoretical domains. Now, that's something that we don't typically show when we talk about the COMBI model, but as practitioners, when we're using this, we find it quite useful to have these up because it lends some color to these subdomains here. So let me talk you through that. So you can see that psychological capability can be further broken down into something like knowledge, which sounds obvious, but also things like memory, attention, and decision-making, and something called behavioral regulation, which is making and forming plans. So this is a really good prompt for us that if we were designing a questionnaire to try and understand what's getting in the way of a behavior occurring, if we wanted to understand it from psychological capability, then we should include questions that look at all of these areas for a really rounded idea about psychological capability. So what I thought we could do is use this in practice to talk about toothbrushing. So I've colored everything in green because I'm making an assumption that many of us are engaging in this behavior every day. So it's mostly green apart from a couple of areas, because I think we've all probably got varying levels of optimism and emotions when it comes to brushing our teeth. I don't feel particularly enthusiastic about it, but I just do it anyway. So what I wanted to do is I would like you to raise your hand if you think that if all of a sudden an article came out that suggested that toothbrushing would lower your life expectancy in a well-established journal that you regarded, do you think that that would stop you from regularly brushing your teeth? So just repeat that. If an article came out that said that brushing your teeth was dangerous for your health, was going to reduce your life expectancy, do you think that would stop you from regularly, again, that's the important word there, brushing your teeth? So I can see a few people raising their hands already. Sounds like for some people that would be enough to get them to stop regularly brushing their teeth, but for others, they're not convinced that would be enough to make that happen. Somebody interesting point there about needing other studies to be convinced. So that's interesting. So when we're talking about something like that, we're talking about belief about consequences. So that's really trying to affect that. Now that's associated with reflective motivation. It might impair my belief about consequences of brushing my teeth. It might impair my reflective motivation for engaging in the activity, but it wouldn't be enough to interrupt that regular habit that I've produced. And I think that's a testament to just how powerful this behavior is in us, right? This is behavior that we engage in quite often. An article's coming out that said that it's dangerous for health, but I'm still going to do it anyway. I'm not convinced that that's enough evidence for me to stop brushing my teeth. Okay, let's look at something else. And let's think about what might happen if all of a sudden the cost of toothpaste becomes really, really expensive. So the trade war with America starting to heat up. All of a sudden it's 3 or 4 times more expensive to buy a tube of toothpaste. So instead of paying £2, now we're having to pay, I don't know, £6, £7 for a tube of toothpaste. Is that going to stop anybody from regularly brushing their teeth? So put your hands up if you think that it would. Not as many hands for this one. Interesting around homemade toothpaste. So I think I'm with you on that one. I think that what I might do is use less toothpaste, as has been suggested in the chat. So in this case, we're talking about environmental context and resources. That's being impaired here through the cost of toothpaste, and that would have an impact on my physical opportunity to engage in the behavior. But again, it's not going to stop me from engaging in that behavior. Again, testament to just how powerful this behavior is. I've got my article out there that says it's dangerous. The toothpaste is really expensive, but I'm going to find a way to do it anyway, because I really believe, or maybe I believe, one of these things is encouraging me to engage in that behavior still. Okay, final thing then. This is going to be really dramatic example. Imagine if all of a sudden everybody in our lives, our friends, our colleagues, our spouse, significant other, has decided to stop brushing their teeth. Anybody think that that would stop them from also regularly brushing their teeth? Raise your hand if you do. Well, a few more people for this one. I think I agree with that. I think if all of a sudden everybody important in my life decided to stop brushing their teeth, I think I might also stop doing it or reduce the amount that I did it. Here we're talking about social influences that we know in psychology is a really powerful influence of the behavior. And I've colored it red because it's just such a dramatic impact here. That's impacting our social opportunity to engage in behavior. And I think as soon as that starts to happen, it's going to have an impact in other areas. So I can imagine, for instance, my social professional identity might change, my belief about capabilities, intention, goals, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, we've started to kind of pull apart this quite powerful Jenga tower that's been established in reinforcing this behavior. So that's what it looks like when it's broken apart. So that was a silly example, but I think it's a really interesting idea about how COM-B can be used in practice, which is it really helps us to consider some of the things that might be getting in the way of a behavior, trying to help us to consider thinking quite systematically about a problem. So what I thought I might do is bring in Olivia, who might be able to help me think about a problem currently. So many of you actually filled in that behavior discovery tool. It was really interesting to read some of your responses to that. One of the behaviors that caught my eye was college students putting rubbish in the correct bins. So Olivia, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm just wondering, when you're thinking about behavior like that and you're looking at the COM-B model, for instance, is there anything that kind of catches your eyes? Anything you immediately think about when you think about that behavior?
Yeah, so I automatically go to my own personal experiences of when I'm out and about and I've got rubbish that I have the intention to recycle it, but the bins aren't labelled accurately enough, or I'm quite a bit confused about what goes where. And ultimately, if I'm in a hurry, I will recycle rather than put it in the right bin if push comes to shove. So it's a sort of, for me, it's about instruction. That's
really interesting. Yeah, so you're talking about actual knowledge about which bins to put the right waste into, but I think you're also talking about whether or not those bins are being provided there as well, which I think just goes to show how powerful that kind of physical opportunity can be in those situations. Curious to hear your thoughts about motivation as well. I mean, do you think that you feel optimistic about recycling? Is that something that is important for you? How does that sit with you as a principle?
Me, individually, it's something I can do. So, you know, in a world where the problems are enormous, I sometimes feel there's not a lot I can do, but that is one behaviour I can do. So that's quite empowering. So from a motivational point of view, I do believe the pros of doing that will outweigh the cons of not.
I think one of the things that's interesting to me that kind of just comes up is this idea about belief about consequences. I think often I kind of put my rubbish away in the bins, or I spend that time recycling it, passing it into the different bins, but I don't get that feedback on what's actually happened to it afterwards, or I don't really know if what I've done has made a difference. And I suppose I could make a claim looking at this model that does impact my motivation a little bit, even though I do engage in that behavior. But I think it would be nice if I kind of occasionally got that feedback, a letter from the council, for instance, that said, you know, look at what you've done with the effort that you've put into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And equally for me, what I wouldn't want to know is the impact of me putting my recycling in the wrong bin. If that was too negative, it might stop me recycling altogether. So it's quite a fine line between what we should be telling people and you know, what we shouldn't, to increase that reflective motivation. Yeah, I didn't know that Wales is the second best recycling country in the world. That's brilliant.
Yeah, they're doing a fantastic job in that space. Thanks, Olivia. That's really interesting. So that's the COM-B model, and it can be really, really useful. And, you know, just to have up there when you're thinking about a problem or a behavior that you're trying to change. And, you know, I would encourage you to look at the full model as well, you know, get these theoretical domains up and really try and think about it from that kind of structured standpoint. COM-B model is fantastic, but it's by no means perfect. if we put rubbish into it, we're going to get rubbish out, okay? And that's something that's really, really important, because we see a lot of the time that people, use the combi model and they think that that's a good thing. And it is that they're trying to apply a behavioral science framework, but it's really, really important that we're using these things correctly, the way they're intended. And with a combi model, in order to set ourselves up for success, we need to do that by putting behaviors into the model. That's why we, as behavioral scientists, are always talking about trying to define behaviors and conducting a behavioral specification. So that's the first step in many of the guides that we've produced as the behavioral science unit. It's this behavioral specification when we're really trying to understand who we want to do what, when, and where differently. So that's the way that we can optimize the combi model for the best good. Now, we've got a scalable approach to identifying different target behaviors and different populations in the behavioral science unit. And that ranges from checking that the behavior is an observable, measurable action, up to doing a quick survey with populations, subject matter experts, and stakeholders, all the way up to undertaking or commissioning behavioral systems mapping, something that's a really, really intensive process. And it's been depicted here as a staircase because, the higher up you go in these steps, the more time and effort is required. But you can see that the very, very first step on this ladder, if you were kind of designing an intervention or trying to understand the behavior, is checking it's an observable, measurable action. So what we're going to do is spend some time in this space today just to consider this in more detail. So really interesting question here around what a behavior is. Okay, you'll see that there's many, many different definitions of that. And I think in the behavioral science unit, we've got a really, really helpful one, which is an observable, measurable action, something that we can see, something we can measure, or a response to something. So it's going to be really important to keep this in your mind, because we're going to do a bit of a quiz later on where we talk about this in a little bit more detail. So we've got something as well called outcomes influences, as well as these behaviors. So let's have a look at this in more detail. If we look at an outcome here, like reducing childhood obesity, we can see some of the different behaviors that are associated with that. These are all things that are observable, measurable actions, like children eating appropriate portion sizes or children eating 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. But we can see that the influences on those behaviors are slightly different. Things like how active children's friends are, or things like how children feel about physical activity, the food that their parents buy them. That's really, really different than this general outcome, which is much broader in reducing childhood obesity. So we've got a little quiz that we're going to do now where we talk about this in a little bit more detail. Now, Dewi, I think you are going to be able, if you can, to post that first question in the poll in the chat. And what we want you to do is consider if you think that this is an outcome, an influence, or a behavior. So the thing I want you to consider is looking both ways before crossing the road. Is that an outcome? Is it an influence? Or is it a behavior? So please vote for that. Wow, it's great to be able to see this live. I can see a lot of people talking about this as a behavior. Now let's consider this in a little bit more detail then. So let's bring up our handy guide. So looking both ways before crossing the road, is it something that we can observe? Certainly, it's something we'd be able to see. If we went and stood at the side of the road, we could see people walking across it. We could be able to see if people were looking both ways. We'd be able to measure that. So I could put down a tally chart for the number of people I saw looking both ways. I could write a tally for all the people who just look one way. And it could be a response to something, for instance, a schema, a thought that somebody has when they go towards the road. So for me, that is a behavior. So I think most people are right on that. The outcome for something like this could be reducing road traffic accidents or increasing the safety of people whilst they're walking to school. So that's a much more general kind of outcome that's much further in the future. But the actual behavior is looking both ways before crossing the road. An influence on that could be, I don't know, the way people feel about cars, could be where you live as well, how busy your neighborhood is. But the behavior is that observable, measurable action. Okay, Dewi, if you could post the second poll, we're going to look at something a little bit more different. So this is improving the health and well-being of the Welsh population. So if you get a moment, have a vote on this. Is it an outcome? Is it an influence? Or is it a behavior? Interesting. It's always difficult, isn't it, when you have this poll coming up and you can see the number of people who have voted. It's difficult not to be influenced by that. That in itself is an influence, isn't it? But I can see that many people are saying outcome. That's something that I agree with. That's a goal we're all very familiar with, certainly in public health. And it's not something that we can observe in the moment. So that's why I would say that it's not a behavior. It's that much kind of broader outcome. Some of the behaviors that are associated to that are things like, eating 5 fruits and veg a day, doing a certain number of minutes of physical activity, but it's a much more general outcome in general. So that for me is an outcome. Okay, let's increase the difficulty a little bit more. And Dari, if you can put the third poll up, this one is attending a local vaccination clinic to get a flu jab. What do you think about this? Is this a outcome? Is it an influence, or is it a behavior? Slightly more tricky, this one. Okay, you can see a lot of people voting on this. Consensus seems to be behavior, with some people suggesting an influence. So let's look at our crib sheet again for what behavior is. So is it something that we can observe? Yes. If we attended a vaccination clinic, we would be able to look at the number of people who are there. So it's something that we could also see. Again, we'd be able to measure that. Could be response as well to an invitation that somebody received to attend a vaccination clinic. So for me, that's checking the right boxes. That is a behavior. I think it gets a bit more tricky because we've got this kind of attending here, whereas, the behavior might also be getting vaccinated. But for me, that is a behavior. Now, the outcome for this might be something like, let me think, what could the outcome for this be? Again, it could go back to increasing the health and well-being of the Welsh population, trying to reduce the number of measles outbreaks, for instance, locally, something like that. Those much broader outcomes and influences, for instance, could be, people's opinions about vaccination. But that is a behavior. Go on, sorry.
Also, if they attend, they get the flu jab. So that's an outcome, increased uptake of flu vaccinations.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okie doke. Well, this is our final item on the quiz. So could you please post the final one, Zoe? And this is really, really difficult, this one, even for us, I think. So let's see what you think about this one. Increase in the public awareness of the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption. Outcome, influence, or a behavior? Okay, so this one is a little bit more split. People are saying influence, people are saying outcome. But I think the interesting thing is not many people have said behavior, which I think is a real positive. So let's have a look at this from this standpoint. Again, we're using this crib sheet to check if it's a behavior. Is it something that is observable? Well, that's where this starts to fall apart. I think we would be able to measure public awareness of the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption, but it's not something that I think we would be able to see in practice. So for me, that means it's not a behavior. Now, I think the question about whether it's an influence or an outcome is a little bit more tricky. For me, I would probably say that this would be an outcome, but you can equally argue that this would be an influence depending on your goal for the actual intervention itself. Now, why is this important? Why do we spend so much time in behavioral science talking about behaviors? Well, I mentioned before that when we're using a framework like the COM-B model, we often need behaviors in order to be able to get the most out of using this. If we put something like this that isn't a behavior in the COM-B model, then it's not going to give us the information that we need. So for instance, it's not going to help us to think really robustly about the problem in the way that we were with that toothbrush example earlier on. We've kind of already decided what our intervention is going to be here. This is an intervention in itself, and it's not going to really help us to think about that from an automatic motivation standpoint or from a physical opportunity standpoint. It's similar to that bridge we looked at earlier on, right? It's a really interesting thing. I'm sure that there would be good in that, but it might not serve in its purpose, which is probably to get people to drink less alcohol, right? Especially if in our audience there already is knowledge about the dangers of alcohol consumption. If we did a robust combi analysis, we might find that actually that's not the problem that's getting in the way of people reducing their alcohol consumption. The problem might be that, you know, their friends and family are engaging in a lot of alcohol, for instance, they're drinking a lot of it, or, you know, the way that alcohol makes them feel. It might not be the knowledge, which might already be present. So it's a really interesting take. I think that the better option here might be something like consuming low or no alcohol in line with recommended weekly limit. So if we put that into the combi model, then all of a sudden all of these areas start to open up for us because we've actually put the behavior in. We can think about that from the social opportunity standpoint. We can think about the friends and family. We can also think about it from, you know, reflective motivation standpoint. How do people feel? What do they think about drinking alcohol? We can also think about it from psychological capability. What is their knowledge about alcohol consumption and how dangerous it is for health? So this gets even more powerful when we start to add some of that behavioral specification, when we start to think about who specifically we're trying to change this behavior. So for instance, young people might be more influenced by their friends and family. I remember there's a really interesting study in psychology where, you know, people at university, they believe that their friends were drinking more alcohol than they actually were. So there was this belief that if I'm a university student, I need to drink a lot of alcohol, which is actually wasn't the case when people were looking at actual how much alcohol was consumed by students on average. So this is how behavioral specification can be really, really useful. Wanted to talk to you about some resources. I appreciate that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and we'll get to some of your questions after this. But if you're interested in the discovery tool, which you've looked at, some of you have looked at already, this can be really useful for trying to understand a behavior, trying to separate that out from an outcome or influence if you're struggling at any moment in time. Also wanted to show you some of our resources. So this QR code will take you to the website for the Behavioural Science Unit. And on that website, we've got resources that guide you through different steps in our behavioural science process. So one of these refers to defining a behaviour. So the behavioural specification phase of designing an intervention. So really, really useful thing to have in your arsenal. Really encourage you to scan this, go to the page, have it bookmarked, or just have a look at some of the resources and see if anything catches your eye. And then final thing is community of practice. Wanted to just advertise that. Please join up. This is for you. You're able to join, and we have regular meetings where we talk about behavioral science in more detail. There's also a conference that we help to deliver. So please do sign up for that too if you're interested in learning more about that. Right. Well, I think we've reached the question and answer. Dewey, is there a way that you usually handle this?
Yeah. First of all, just to thank you, James, for the great presentation. So thought-provoking. I think it's it's certainly got my my mind whirring, sort of thinking about considerations before sort of embarking on a piece of work, really, just day to day. So just to to thank you and Olivia as well for presenting. It's a great session. So yeah, in terms of Q&A, quite informal, really. So if happy to open it out to attendees, really. So feel free to put something in the chat if you'd like to ask James or Olivia, or you can stick your hand up as well. Raise your hand if you want to come in. If you had anything you'd want to ask them after that presentation, or something you need a bit more clarification on, or anything, happy to open it out to the audience. Thank you there as well. So I think unfortunately we're rapidly running out of time in the session as well. So if there are any other if there aren't any other questions, we can draw the session to a close. So just a reminder, as I said, we'll send out a copy of the slides out to all attendees, and a bit more information on future climate spotlight sessions as well. We're just planning the next sort of batch at the moment. So as soon as we've got times and dates and topics confirmed, we'll be in touch with those as well. Similarly, if there's anything you'd like to see in terms of a session, any thoughts, any feedback on the sessions, please let us know as well. And a recording of the session will be made available as well. That'll be available on our website. So that's it. Thank you very much for attending. Diolch yn fawr iawn am fynychu, and we'll bring the session to a close there. Thank you. Goodbye. Hwyl fawr.
Thank you.
Thank you.